Ischgl, Austria, home of the pretty cool looking E5 tram. Terrain that includes a duty-free shopping run down into Switzerland, and a trail map that I really can't find an easy way of breaking down for you. So rather than posting a video about the pros and cons of a resort like I typically do, why don't you join me for the day and we'll talk about Ischgl along the way. I'm starting the day here on the balcony of the studio apartment I'm renting directly across from the A2 gondola. Now, while it's a studio apartment, it's got the feel of a one-bedroom. But either way, the great thing is that all I have to do is wake up in the morning and look out the window to get a sense of the line at the gondola. It opens every day at 8:30, and throughout the week you've wanted to get there at about 8:15 in order to beat the major crowds. Once it's open, it's a cattle call for at least an hour and a half. The past few days have been a bit cloudy, overcast, with a little bit of snow, still beautiful, but today's supposed to be bluebird, so I'm probably going to get there a little bit before 8:15 because everybody's going to be eager to be out in the sun. Alright, here's the plan for the day. We'll head straight to the E5 tram, do a run there, then hit the duty-free ski run down into Switzerland, then bounce around a bit. I'll show you some typical slopes you can find here in Ischgl, and then finish with a run that I keep coming back to, slope number 7. Okay, so we got the A2 gondola down. From start to finish, the base of the A2 where I'm staying, all the way to the E5 tram, can take about an hour. We have to hit the C1 chairlift, the E2 chairlift, the E4 chairlift, and then you can ski down to the E5 tram. So this area is called Ischgl. We'll get back to it a little bit later when we're talking about the layout of the trail map and the mountain. But it's kind of a convergence point with a lot of different chairlifts leaving from here and a lot of different slopes coming down to here. We're headed to the C1 chairlift. One of the issues is going to be whether the C1 is actually open this early. Sometimes you get down here when you're on the first gondola ride up and the chairlifts haven't quite opened yet. And C1 is open. I'm not even going to try to break down the trail map for you. It's kind of like Ski Arlberg, also known as St. Anton, also in Austria, in that when you look at the trail map, it's hard to tell which way is up. They have to put an arrow sometimes to make it clear to you, and it's very spread out. So I guess the way I would describe it is a bunch of interconnected flower petals sitting on a pond, and you jump from petal to petal. That's the best I got. On day 3 or 4, I was still trying to figure out what happens if I go over there. But back to the conversion points. The trail map actually sits over 2 resorts, Ischgl in Austria and Samnaun in Switzerland. There's one major point in Ischgl, Ischgl, and one in Samnaun, Alptrida, where a whole bunch of slopes unload and a whole bunch of chairlifts take off in different directions. It's kind of crazy when you ski down to those points because you see chairlifts going in every single direction. We're now going from the E2 chairlift to the E4 chairlift. Ischgl and Samnaun are on the Icon Pass. And the cost in Europe is a lot less than it is in the US. I got a pass. 449 euros for 7 days in mid-February. And because I'm staying in Ischgl itself, I got a discount to 395 euros. That is a deal. That's $67 per day, going down to 59. When you're in the US, you can get some resorts which cost $150, $180 per day. One of the other benefits by staying at the base in Ischgl is that you see a lot of things you normally wouldn't see when you go back to your accommodations somewhere else away from the mountain. For example, one night there was a race, and because the chairlifts weren't working, the skiers, the racers, were pulled up by a snowcat in a line. Another example is just seeing the snowcats. The slope that empties out by the A2 tram is 1A. It's a red slope. It's actually very steep. It would be the equivalent of a black slope in the US. And the cat can't go up it by itself. It has to be pulled by a cable. I'm not sure if you can see it here. Probably not, but trust me, it was being pulled up the mountain. And lastly, at the end of the day, because slope 1A is steeper than you think, you sometimes get skiers and boarders who didn't realize how difficult it was going to be. There was one guy who was struggling to get down, and everybody drinking beer at the après-ski venues at the bottom were cheering him on as he finally made it down. Most people speak German. In the entire week I've been here, I only heard one group of women who were British, one family that was French, and everybody else speaks German. It wasn't until yesterday that I finally encountered two groups of Americans. But don't worry, everybody speaks English as we approach the E4 chairlift. After all, the slogan for Ischgl is relax if you can. It's in English. One of the luxuries of some of the chairlifts in Ischgl are that they're heated. They have heated seats, which goes really well with the canopy when it's cold. So I'm taking advantage of that now. Another thing I've seen on some of the Ischgl chairlifts that I haven't seen anywhere else is that when you pull up to load, you're standing on a mat that has lights that show you exactly where you should be to line up with the chair. So the stretch down from the E4 chairlift to the E5 tram involves a little bit of a catwalk at the beginning, zigzagging over there. But once we come around here, you'll be able to see right over here, this is where the E5 tram is. We're headed right down there. It's not quite in the sun yet, so maybe I'll hang out a little bit. I don't know how long it's going to take for the slope off of the E5 tram to get in the sun, but we're almost there. So what's the deal with the E5 tram? Well, I was online several years ago and I saw a photo of it and I thought, wow, that looks really cool. Where is that? And that's how I discovered Ischgl, sadly. At the time, it looked very futuristic. It still looks more futuristic than many trams. Apparently, it was built in an environmentally friendly way to the extent that you can do that with a tram. Either way, I think it's a really cool looking tram, and as soon as I got to Ischgl, it's the first place I skied to. Another interesting point about it is that the loading and unloading stations are pretty exposed. Normally, you go inside a building to load onto a tram and to get off, but here's out in the open. Okay, getting off the E5 tram, there is only one marked route down. That's ski route 42. Ski routes on the Austrian trail system are a little bit different than blue, red, or black strokes. A little bit above. The ski routes are not really controlled. They don't necessarily look for obstacles all the time, so you ski with a little bit more caution. And I can tell you, we've had snow over the past 2 days, and the conditions on ski route 42 are much better. There used to be a lot of bare spots, and they were developing bumps. It looks like they must have groomed it because it wasn't this flat before. So it really is kind of the equivalent to a red slope right now. One of the great things about taking the E5 trams, if you look up to the left or to the right, there are other lines you can take. They're inbound, but they're not official slopes. So at the top of the tram, they do have a big post which discloses avalanche risk and what that actually means. So if you are going to try and hit some of those lines, first of all, you should have the right gear and pay attention to the avalanche risk. Right here, you got to get into your tuck, pick up a little bit of speed, but that's basically it. You get some great views, great potential lines on the left and right at those ridges. And the E5 tram itself is pretty cool when you're on it. Because there's so much glass, you get such an expansive view of the landscape as you come up. Well, unfortunately, it looks like my microphone cut off while I was skiing down the duty-free run. So let me just tell you what I said now, and I'll put it over the video of me skiing. I started out on the side because the duty-free run is groomed, and at this point in the day, it's going to get pretty icy with people having already scraped off the snow. So why not start out with a little bit nicer snow on the side, eventually cutting back over onto the run. Now the duty-free run is slope number 80 and it's red. On the Austrian trail map system, red is a little bit more difficult than a blue slope in the US and not quite as difficult as a black slope. But when I was in Kitzbuhel with a bunch of friends, we tried to figure out how the Austrians are grading a slope as red or black or blue, because it seemed inconsistent there, and I've noticed the same thing here. Sometimes a red slope is more difficult than a black slope. And what we found was that at least in Kitzbuhel, the ratings are not purely based on steepness. They also took into account the length of the slope. So if you had a long slope with not much vertical drop versus a short slope with big vertical drop, you might get some what seem like inconsistencies to you when you're skiing. And that's true on the duty-free run as well. Some portions of it are very steep and others are just as flat as a green slope in the US. Ultimately, the whole purpose here is to get some duty-free shopping in. You come up to Samnaun on the right. And what I was expecting when I first came was like an outlet type situation where there are shops on top of shops on top of shops. There's 50 of them, but it's not actually like that. There are a couple of shops as soon as you exit the slope, but to get to the rest, you do have to walk around the town of Samnaun. And it's pretty residential. You see a lot of hotels, a couple of restaurants and cafes, and you ask yourself, like, where exactly are the shops? Well, just keep walking or hop on the shuttle bus. You'll eventually find them. And they do have great deals, everything you expect at duty-free shopping. They have liquor, perfume, goggles, ski clothing in general, local foods, and all of it is duty-free. I wasn't sure how significant an attraction this was, but I did notice that there are a lot of people who come here and do their shopping. Ultimately, when you've bought what you want and put everything you bought into your backpack, you jump back onto slope 80 and head down to a double-decker tram, which will take you back up to the main ski area of Samnaun. And one thing for boarders is it gets flat at the end, so you'll want to keep up your speed, or at least bring a pole to help you along the way. Oh yeah, and for those of you who like van life, Samnaun has you covered. They have a whole lot here filled with people who are living the lifestyle, so maybe you just skip Ischgl and come and park here. For pedestrians, the town of Ischgl is essentially split in half. There's a side where I'm staying by the A3 and A2 gondolas, and then there's a pedestrian tunnel that takes you to the other side where the A1 gondola is. The tunnel is kind of famous. Featured in the movie Downhill starring Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which I tried to watch but couldn't finish. Much of that movie was filmed in Ischgl. Now that I've been here, maybe I'll try watching it again. But back to the tunnel. It has a wall of fame, posters as you're going along the moving walkway, which show you famous artists who performed here. Ischgl looks just like you'd imagine an Austrian ski town to be. Perfect for a romantic family ski trip, with restaurants, cafes, and shops, including a lot of clothes from Bogner, a German ski fashion designer which is pretty big in the European ski towns. There are the Bogner stores themselves, and then the line is carried in regular stores. It's very fashionable and not what you typically see on the slopes in the US. And if you want the après-ski, there's plenty of that too. One question you may have, particularly if you're coming from the US or Canada, is how large is Ischgl? Well, Ski Magazine did a article on the top 10 largest resorts in the world, and they actually compared European to North American resorts, which is often difficult to do because European resorts tend to measure their size by kilometers of trails, and the US and Canada measure their size of resorts by skiable acres. But Ski Magazine did it somehow. So it's tough to say. It's to compare Ischgl. Ischgl was not on the list. Number 9 and 10 were North American resorts. Park City, number 9, and Whistler Blackcomb as number 10. So Ischgl, according to Ski Magazine, has to be somewhat smaller than Park City and Whistler. And sorry, I got that reversed. Whistler is number 9, Park City was number 10. But I would say, when you take into account all of the open terrain at Ischgl, it's probably bigger or the same size as Park City. Because Park City, you've got to stick to the slopes. The rest of it's just trees. Here it's wide open terrain. Ischgl's like most European resorts. There are tons of places to eat on the mountain, and most of them are sit-down table service restaurants. You can find cafeterias, but they're not the mainstay in terms of on-mountain dining. Okay, so now we'll head down to Alp Trida, one of those convergence points that I mentioned. This is on the Samnaun side, and you'll see as we get down there, chairlifts everywhere. But first, let's enjoy this nice little blue slope. here we go. And get a little preview as we head down there. Suddenly, we'll be underneath a whole bunch of chairlifts. Just standing over here in the section of the trail map that has the N and M chairlifts, it's so beautiful. This is a reason alone to come to Ischgl. Okay, we're now coming down into Idalp, 2 o'clock, and we're going to take a chairlift up to go hit slope number 7. There's a whole bunch of chairlifts. It doesn't look as crazy as over on the Samnaun side, but still, this is sort of a central location. Over there in Idalp, you have restaurants, children's center, stores. I believe there's even a surgeon who can help you if you have a problem. You want to see what 90% of the lift lines have been like for my week in Ischgl? Let's go get on chairlift B1. Just ski right up. Heading down now into slope 7, you can see the A2 gondola up there at the top. What I like about this slope is that it's pretty secluded. You come down into the valley and it's just this slope. Unlike a lot of the rest of the resort where there are slopes converging from all different directions, when you're down here, it's just this. And you'll see in a second, it's a little bit icy right now, but we'll get deep in the valley and there's a big ridge to your left, a big ridge to your right. As you can see now, you're just kind of like down in this valley. There are actually some great lines up there to the left. If you ski up there taking slope number 4 or 4A, there are signs which will tell you that the area up along this ridge is not controlled. So if you're going to do those lines, which look incredible, you just have to make sure you have the right gear, pay attention to avalanche risk, but really those lines are pretty short. They're only about 40 turns, 30 to 40 turns. Back to the slope 7, you see it's a nice cruising run. Everybody's doing that, working on their turns. It's just a nice run. Hopefully I gave you a good sense of what Ischgl's like today. A bunch of flower petals connected on a pond. I can't believe that's the best thing I could come up with for an analogy to the layout. I'd probably have to ski here a month in order to really figure the place out. Sounds like a good idea.
Don't go.